Hi, I'm Everett Skinner IV, and today we're going to show you how to raise one of our post and beam carriage barns, barnyard style. What makes our post and beam barn so easy to build is that we pre-cut everything in the shop with our state-of-the-art CNC machine. All the timbers are cut precisely to 1/100th of an inch. Each part is numbered, labeled, and checked before it arrives on the job site. The timbers themselves will arrive in smaller package units, all shrink wrapped, on a tractor trailer. You'll need a small forklift or a lull type machine to unload the timbers. You want to have a crew of about 4 to 5 helpers to raise the frame. They don't need to be experienced timber framers, just an average builder with even minimal carpenter experience be able to easily raise one of our frames. Typical is an 8-inch wide concrete foundation wall. And what we're doing right now is we're putting down the foam sill sealer and the pressure treated 2x8 plate on the foundation. Once this is complete, on top of that we'll put our signature authentic timber sill. Once the pressure treated 2x8 is put in place, we set along the timber sill along the foundation. The bottom of the timber sill also has to get marked out and drilled out to slip over the existing bolts in the concrete foundation. So that's what we'll do now. Grab an 1.5-inch drill bit, dado out a pocket so the timber sill sits on top. So now as the timber sills go on, you just have to make sure the laps are going in the correct direction. This building is a 32 by 32. We want to make sure that the outside dimensions all the way around equal 32 by 32. Come in a little bit. I got 32 on the money. Perfect. Yep. So now what we just done is check the 2 diagonals on both corners. It's really critical that the timber sill is square before any posts go on it. So now that it's squared up, we will lock the 4 corners in with a timber lock. When you're drilling these timber locks in the corner, this will just lock the timber sill into place, and when the post drops over, these will be all hidden by the post itself. The next step is to string the corners of the foundation and get the timber sills straightened in line between the corners. This carriage barn has 4 interior posts. The next step, now that the sills are on, is to set what we call the knife plates to set on the interior posts. So the best way to locate the interior post is to string a line across where the interior posts are going to be, and then off the plan that we provide, you can get measurements to set the posts exactly, these knife plates exactly where they go. These blue marks right here represent the 4 knife plates, and you can see on the plans how the orientation of the knife plate goes front to back on all these posts. So the first bent spacing is 8 foot, we'll put a mark at 8. And then the next bent spacing is 12. So 8 plus 12, we'll put a mark at 20 feet. Before the string line is taken down, the next important step is to get the measurement from the top of the knife plate to the string. That will determine the overall length of our interior post that we'll have to cut prior to assembling the bends. The holes are drilled, and now we'll epoxy the bolt holes and install the 6-inch threaded rod onto the knife plate. Let it dry for about a half an hour and it'll be cured. And the knife plates are locked in place. All the hardware for all of the timber frame components are all included with the kit. We provide the epoxy, the bolts, all the oak pegs, all the fasteners, everything you need to assemble the frame. So now we'll move to the back line of posts and repeat the same procedure. While the sill plates are getting put down and the vents are starting to be assembled, we also have another couple guys that are starting to assemble the rafters for the carriage barn. The rafters are set up to have a tongue and fork rafter peak that locks in with 2 pegs and a collar tie system. So once this rafter and collar tie is built, we use the crane to pick them up one by one and set them on top of the barn. So when the pegs get pounded in, you'll have 1.5 inches on the front and back exposed. As the rafters get stacked, it's important to leave a space between them. That way the pegs can get driven down the full 1.5 inches from both sides. As you're assembling all the different components, every piece has a number, so it's really important to double and triple check that each piece you're putting together is in the proper location. We have a plan that shows you the exploded view of how they all come together, so it makes it really easy for assembly. The next step in the process is to build the bents. The bent is the main carrying system for the timber frame structure. The bents in a carriage barn look like an H. On this barn, there happens to be 4 of them. It's really important how you place the bents and how you start to build them. You always want to remember how they're going to be picked up in what order. So as the crane comes in to set the bents, you always want to keep in the back of your head, he's going to set the furthest bent first and the next one in. So keep that in mind as we pull the crane in. We're going to assemble our building by raising the furthest bent first and work our way this way. That means we have to build them in the opposite order. So it just takes little thinking, but a good planning will make for a nice smooth day on raising day. Right now what we're putting into place on this bent is called the tie beam. This is the heaviest beam of the whole structure. This is an 8x12, 22-foot long piece of timber. It's always best to use machinery on heavy pieces like this to save any injuries. So when you're assembling the tie beam, the braces and the beam all have to come together as once. So it's very critical as everything comes together. Before you actually seat the tenon in the tie beam, you have to work the 2 braces at the same time. Come on out. A hair more? Yep, I'm in too. Now we can come back. Just work the braces at the same time. Started. When you're assembling the bends, it's best to take a come along to pull everything together and make sure everything, all the joints and all the connections are nice and tight before anything gets pegged. Okay, I'm perfect. You tight yet, James? Okay. It's also important to keep in mind what size pegs that you're using. This is going to be a gable end wall. This is the outside of the building. That's why these pegs are being driven flush on one end and sticking out only 1.5 inches on the inside. Okay, grab your brace up top, James in the middle, and all 3 at once. .110 is the front corner. Okay. Yep. Okay, back in. Yeah, there we go. This is bent number 2 that we're building right now. This is the gable side. So it's really important also to remember any other posts that go into the timber sill also get installed at this point as well. Right here is where where an entry door goes. You can see the door posts also have a tenon that drops into the sill, so it's important to remember to get those installed. On the gable end bends, you can also pre-install the 4x4 siding nailers wherever possible. This will save time and makes it easier to do when it's laying on the ground. All of the siding nailers get installed and fastened using a 4-inch timber lock. It just simply gets driven on a 45-degree angle into the side of the post, and it's done. So we're moving on to our third bent. These are the 2 interior bents for the barn. So before we assemble the bents, we have to pre-cut the interior posts. So that's where these numbers come back into play. This post has to be 14 7/8 longer than the ones that sit on the sill. So to get that measurement, you take the gable end bent that's already built and you hook on the bottom of the tie beam and get your length, which in this case is 97.5. We'll go over to the post and add 14 7/8 inches to that to get the exact length of our interior posts. Once the posts get cut to length, the interior post, you also have to drill out, bore out a hole so it sets down over the nut and washer. The oak peg, these are a timber framer's nail. This is the heart and soul of timber framing. As the wood shrinks and dries around it, this peg gets tighter and tighter by the day. We've done a lot of engineering behind the pegs, look at each connection and make sure each connection is strong enough to withstand the loads that occur onto it. It's the barnyard style to leave 1.5 inches of the peg exposed for a decoration. We round over, sand over the top edge of the peg to give it a nice smooth over finish. You see on this tie beam there's one larger dovetail cut in it. This is for the stairwell. It really matters which way this goes in end to end, so just make sure you refer to your plan, look at the picture to make sure you have it facing the correct direction. The last of the rafters is just about complete, and the next step is to put on the overhang. Standard, we have a 4x4, a 4-inch overhang that gets attached to the top of the gable rafters. This will just get screwed in every 16-inch on center with a 6-inch timber lock. Well, we now have all 4 bends complete and ready to go. The next thing we can do to prep for the crane is set the back lean-to posts along the back wall. We'll set the 4 lean-to posts and the rafter plate that sits on top of it, and then that'll be one more thing that's ready to go in advance of tomorrow's crane day.
Yep. Awesome.
So when assembling the lean-to post and the beam, it's always important to know which direction to go. The half laps go in only one direction at the top plate, so you have to start on this building from left to right. We found the best way to temporarily set a brace into a post is to use the bullpen. You put the brace in place and the bullpen in the hole, and then that will keep it in place until you're ready to drop the beam on. The rafter plate detail calls for a slot within the 2 rafter plates. This 2-foot long stainless steel spline plate will drop into the slotted connection, and the steel pin will go through the steel into the wood member. The steel pin needs to get driven in about 3/4 of an inch past the opening, and then in the end we'll install a 3/4 inch oak peg to flush off the connection. That way no one knows there's steel in the connection. The best way to get these steel pins in place is to take the bullpen and start one end into the steel plate. And now this other side can get dropped in until it perfectly aligns and insert the steel pin into place. Well, that's a wrap on prep day, day one of the raising. Tomorrow morning, we'll have the crane come in bright and early and raise all of these bends and all of these trusses and put everything into place. So bring your family, your friends, invite your neighbors. It's gonna be an awesome raising and a really fun experience. Well, it's the day we've all been waiting for. Today is raising day for our post and beam barn. The crane has just showed up. The crane that we recommend to raise the carriage barn, only about a 10 or 20 ton boom truck crane, somewhere in that range. You don't need a very big crane as long as he can pull up close to the foundation like we can here. This will be a memorable day that you'll never forget. You'll have your family, friends, all helping, and it's a project that'll last with you for a lifetime. We are going to start setting the bends. We have 4 bends to set in place on the foundation. The bends will be installed, then the rafter plates go next, and then the trusses and the rafters are the final portion of the raising. All right, fellas, it's raising day. Everyone hats in. Let's do this. Woo! The best way to strap a bend is to put 2 straps spaced evenly in thirds on the bend. You don't want to put 1 strap in the middle, that'd be a little too unstable. So we'll do 2 straps and hook it just like this. While you're setting the bends, there's already pre-mortised out holes in the sill plates to make it easy to locate exactly where the bends go. So as the crane goes down, just drop the tenons into the sill plate and it'll sit firmly down right in place. Once the first bend is in place, you want to have a couple long 2x4s on hand to brace back to the foundation and perfectly level the first post. In a little, guys. The best way to rig these bends is to actually choke the strap and choke it tight, centered right on the top of the tie beam. So with the second bend, the front post is going to be on the timber sill and drop into the mortise pocket, and these 2 interior posts are going to slip over the top of our knife plates that are secured to the foundation that are slotted. Started.
Started. I'm in.
Perfect. Okay. Here's a 9 for you. As soon as the second bend is in place, the next step is to secure the 2 together with these bent connectors. You have the 2 braces, the bent connector, and once that drops into place, you'll need to take the come along and the straps and suck everything together tightly. So we'll do the back right now. The next step is to put the bent connector on in the front, and then the floor joist will drop in the middle, and then the whole structure will be a solid frame. At this time, you'll want to install the steel plate in the bent connector before the next bent gets put into place. When putting these bent connectors into place, it's always good to make sure the dovetails are located in the correct direction as well. These dovetails are facing down, which will be the garage door jamb, so keep an eye on that. There's also these Simpson steel connectors that will hold these bent connectors in place during construction. So we'll go ahead and fasten this right now. All the hardware and all the fasteners are included with the kit. The final step to connecting these 2 bends together is to install the intermediate floor joist. These floor joists are dovetailed and just drop right in from the top. So we're gonna go ahead and start on one side and install all the floor joists. The floor joists just get screwed down with a 6-inch timber lock from the top angled on a 45. Once all these joists are in place and screwed down, we'll be ready to move on to the next bend and repeat the same process over again. Bent number 3 coming in. This is the second interior bent to go in place.
Started.
On this bend, there's many peg holes to align.
I'm started. 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 Go, come on down. Good. Yeah.
Now all the bends are in place, the floor joists are all installed, this frame is locked in and it's solid. The next step is to start installing the rafter plates that run down the eaves of the building. To install the rafter plates, you first take your braces and get those temporarily locked into place with the bullpen. And then up next will come the rafter plate that'll set right down on top and get pegged. It's also important to keep in mind the way, again, the laps go on the rafter plate. The rafter plates can only run along in one direction. So on this plan, we have to start from this side of the building and work down. Since this is the outside of the building, again, I'm using a peg that is 9 inches. So it only sticks in 1.5 inches on the inside only. At this point, it's a good idea to tie off with your safety gear to ensure for a safe raising as we move up higher with the structure. These rafter plates are also some good sized beams that are coming in. That's why you'll really appreciate having the crane. The easiest way to set the rafter plate is to angle it like so and start on one end and let it drop and work your way down, ensuring the braces go in the pocket at the same time. Before securing the rafter plate, you always want to make sure the gap is perfectly tight. There's sometimes you might need to take the come along and actually squeeze these rafter plates together. And this connection, this half lap, gets secured using 2 12-inch GRK screws. And then there's a slot again for the 2-foot stainless steel plate that'll go in and help lock this connection in place. If the building has a lean-to like this one does, even though it seems like these pegs would have been on the inside and should be sticking out 1.5 inches, what we normally do is run siding to cover up the second floor knee wall. Therefore, these pegs should be cut flush. Next up is the rafters and collar ties. As the rafter drops into place, we'll be using 2 of these timber lock screws on each side. To just refer to your plan what length screws go into each rafter end. The best way to brace the first gable back is with these 16-foot 2x4s. We'll attach a couple of screws into the top, level the gable, and then attach the bottom once it's perfectly plumbed up. Right there. A little more. Perfect. This barn has a collar tie and rafter system. This can all be built on the ground, as you saw. Some of our carriage barns have a different roof type system. That's called a ridge, beam, and rafter system. With that system, the correct procedure is to first set up the 2 gable ends of the building. The next step will be to install the structural ridge beam and posts that come down to the 2nd floor. And then all the individual rafters have to be set one by one at the end. So it's 2 different ways of building the roof system depending on what style you have. Setting the rafters is one of the most rewarding parts of building the carriage barn. We got half the rafters complete and it's starting to look like a barn right now. It's time for the last gable to be raised. So it's a timber framing tradition to top out the new structure with an evergreen tree. To us, it's a symbol of gratefulness and respect. Gratefulness for the forest that produced the wood, gratefulness for a safe raising day, and also, of course, a symbol of good luck for everyone who enters the new barn. The rafters on the main barn are complete, and the next step is to put the overhang rafters. These are usually done by hand. It's best practice to install the rafters at the main post locations first as you work your way down, and then infill the middle. This will ensure a straight rafter plate line as we go. Now that we have all the rafters set at the principal post locations, we can start infilling the middle of these lean-to rafters. Now we'll install the nailers up in the 2 gable ends, which will feature our barnyard signature bow top windows. On the gable ends, it's common for these nailers to stick out 3/4 of an inch past the tie beam. That's okay. The reason for that is so the siding from the bottom half of the building can come up, and then the siding will lap over from the gable down. Now we're installing the arch piece for our signature bow top window. This is one of the most decorative cuts on the barn. You can see how this piece has arches and dados coming into it. This would be a very difficult piece to cut by hand only with our CNC machine. If your barn has overhead doors, these door jambs are left long and need to be trimmed in the field. We like to have the door jambs trimmed about 1/4 inch up from the concrete so it doesn't wick up water. And then they can be secured into the timber sill. This will all get trimmed up and covered up with the garage door trim in the end. Every carriage barn comes standard with a heavy timber stairway. These are 4x12 heavy timber stair stringers already pre-cut out, so it makes it so much easier for assembly. Now that the posts are set down over the knife plates, you'll want to drill 2 holes in the bottom of the post, one at 3 inches up and one at 5 inches up, with a 3/4 inch drill bit. Once those are drilled, you'll take the steel pin and drive it through the base plate, and then a 3/4 oak peg cut flush to cap it off, and it's finished. Well, raising day is now complete. It took our team only 2 days to raise this 32 by 32 carriage barn. It was an amazing couple of days. We had lots of timbers going up in the air. The precision of our kits is absolutely amazing. If you're looking for the most authentic post and beam barn, from the timber sill to the heavy timber rafters, you have it all with the Barnyard's Carriage Barn. Looking at the frame against the blue sky is a really special moment and something you can only get with a timber frame building. It's amazing to see all the timbers all connected with only authentic joinery with oak pegs. We also sign our name and put our footprint on every frame we raise at the top of the door sill. We'll put our logo, the pine tree, to remember the forest that provided the wood for the barn. Now that the timber frame is all complete, the next steps would be to roof deck the building and get the shingled or metal roof put on. The next step would be to apply the siding, finish out the doors, windows, and exterior trim. Thank you so much for watching this carriage barn raising video. We look forward to working with you on your project. All right, guys, it was a great day raising this post and beam barn. Job well done. Woo!